Hi, and welcome to the almost last lecture for our literature course. I hope that we are all doing well today and that we're preparing for the final. I went ahead and opened the final up. It will be open till March 12th, which is basically a week from today, and you'll be able to go in and, of course, make the comments and things that you want to do. Now, some of you have posted some concerns about we can't find the multiple choice, and you can't find this, and you can't find that. And I've been trying to get a hold of everyone via phone to make sure that I explain what the final is going to be. The final, I changed that based on what you guys were doing as a class, and I figured that the better way for you to really get something out of this course wasn't for you to fill in bubbles and to guess passages, but instead to interpret and to engage the literature. So the final is comprised of two questions or prompts that you will then answer from your perspective using the information from your books and also from our discussions. It's open book, open note. You are free to use whatever you would like to use for it. It is a writing type final, therefore it's open. You can go in as many times as you like. You can review, revise, edit, etc., etc. I'm looking for about 3 to 5 paragraphs per question. A little bit longer is okay, but you really want to target a well-written and well-crafted essay. And remember, one of the best ways to craft a strong essay is first to outline, and then to go in and to really develop your ideas, making sure that each of your sections, each of your paragraphs have a main idea, evidence that supports that main idea, analysis that explains what that evidence tells your reader about your main idea in that section, and of course a link back to your overall thesis or your overall prompt for writing the work. So that's the final. Now the goal is for you to really use this as a space for you to make a substantive commentary on what you've learned this semester in this literature course. Not just to say good, bad, or indifferent, but to really think about what kind of understanding you have about American literature from this period. And I will say, looking over your postings for week 8, I could really see that you've all developed a very sophisticated lens in order to view literature. I urge you all to go back to that first week when you were posting and to really look at how much fluency you've all developed in literature. You're all very cognizant of these subtle moves that are occurring in The Swimmer, that are occurring in Good Country People, that are appearing in the Sal Bello piece about Augie March. You're all picking up these strains, and I think you should all be very happy about the journey that you've taken and the enlightenment that you've achieved. Now, this selection of readings, most of you mentioned that you really did enjoy it, and it really was settled around the period following World War II, which was what we were calling a shift into postmodernity. And the postmodern period really kind of focuses on this sense of the experiment, taking a narrative from a traditional form. There's a tendency toward discontinuity in narrative and historical perspectives. There's a sense of alienation. There's often a sense of asocial individualism. And of course, kind of this sense of existentialism, that, you know, this ennui that they feel. A lack of knowing how to be, a lack of knowing how to know. Ontological and epistemological certainty were gone for many of these individuals after World War II. There is still a desire to interweave symbolism within postmodernity, and of course there is a denial of order, kind of a denial of the traditional sense. Now, many of you mentioned in regards to postmodernity, for instance, like Joe L. mentioned, that postmodernity is a commentary on the time period sense of education, science, and the upscale lifestyle, which is exactly correct. This lack of knowing how to be, this lack of ontological certainty is definitely in those areas. Justin also mentioned the sense of disillusionment that he felt occurring in all of these pieces, and that is a strain of postmodernity. Brandy mentioned that these were very different readings, and they are. They're that discord, that discontinuity. The swimmer, Nettie, is not somebody we would see in Mark Twain. It's not somebody we would see in Kate Chopin or in Henry James. This is a different animal, a different creature. Prinzetia mentioned that these pieces left you wanting more. Not that you were dissatisfied, but just that you had this sense of unsettlement. You were not settled by the ending. It left you wanting more. Betty mentioned that she enjoyed the stories, and there was this sense of aloneness, the sense of alienation and exile, which is exactly what the postmodern period was dealing with. Naya mentioned that the postmodern ideas she felt popping up were this sense of constant change, a lack of a firm foundation. Then this reflected the changes both occurring in politics and in social life, and this cannot be, that point, Naya's point, cannot be taken any stronger, in that the lack of foundation for the postmodern period following the war really did unsettle people. It unsettled and got at the individual's core. Daniel mentioned that this idea that these felt very relevant or very close to the present, and that is definitely a key. There's also, for Jeremy B., he mentioned this theme of generalization, you know, this manipulation, this deceit, and of course you're going to see that, this turning of ideas, this questioning of authority, of perspective, and narrative. Michelle mentioned that all of the stories seem to deal with this theme of emptiness or this theme of loss, which definitely fits right into our postmodern period. Jerry mentioned that they captured an inner state of consciousness, and the postmoderns were very invested in this idea of how do we know, and knowing about knowing, and that tension, and that's a good thing that Jerry brought up. Ronaldo mentioned that the 1950s were a period of relaxation in sense, but a very bizarre sense of being settled or relaxed. You know, we also had from, let's see, April mentioned that there's a directness of writing. There's a calling almost of attention to the writerliness of this. And one of the big things of postmodernity was the meta. Writing about writing, thinking about thinking, being about being. This meta was really, metacognition, meta, was very, very key, and I like that April pointed that out. Now, many of you, as you were going through these stories, really hit on a couple of great observations, and I think that one of the big things that many of you mentioned was Flannery O'Connor's story. And I don't know if you know much about Flannery O'Connor, but she's an interesting soul. I urge you to do a little bit of research on her. She actually had, I guess you'd say, a lot of parallels to this story. Now, let's see, Charles mentioned that there was this sense of expanding, of knowledge, of questioning happening in Good Country People. And Corwin mentioned that there was a movie-like quality to this, that this narrative attempted to capture almost in a realistic way this experience that was very internal. And of course, Hattie mentioned you know, the sense of desire too. Now we also had, you know, in Angela's posting, this notion that these ideas really haven't changed that much, that we're still wrestling with this sense of ability and disability. We also had from Lacey in the sense of disability, this engagement, this almost a privileging of the differently abled or the disabled. Michelle, well, let's see, I'm sorry. We also had Vera, Vera mentioned, and this I think is a good commentary, that the sense that there was a bifurcation of common sense versus education. You know, what is better to be? What is better to have? This also fed into, as Kimberly mentioned, this notion of trust. Can we have trust in a postmodern world? And, of course, the sense of manipulation or deceit. And Flannery O'Connor really was a very interesting character, and in this story there's a sense of Love being an object, love, making you young, almost making you an empath, and almost like an idealization. There's a lot of mother-child debate in this story, which is very different from the other mother-child relationships we've seen throughout this semester. Now, most of you also mentioned in regards to Sal Bellows' work, the sense of capturing an audience or capturing a character that we may not have a lot of familiarity with. Sal Bellows is, of course, a Nobel Prize winner for literature. He is very intellectual. This is a man that really is he really at his core is a thinker and as a creator of knowledge. He wants you to capture in his story a sense that an ordinary person who walks down the street can open up this inner world, an inner world where other thoughts and ideas kind of gather and riot and get in a sense of debate in their story. The worst and often the saddest mistake to make is to think that he's showing off, because he's not showing off. He really is kind of being good-natured, almost satirical. He's talking about that there's this seduction to trying to be smart, or seduction to appearing to be one of the intelligentsia. That there's always this hunger for us to know more, and this kind of satirical tug and pull with it is really what he's talking about. He wants to, in this, The Adventures of Augie March, he really wants to take this kind of almost like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and kind of note that one can create an identity out of these different moments, these cultural engagements, this kind of plotting of experience moments in the narrative. And many of you mentioned in regards to Sal Bellows that you enjoyed kind of the snapshot that he caught of life. Gwendolyn mentioned that it felt like it popped right off of the page of the 1950s. Now, I think that Deborah is probably a little more accurate in the sense that it does depict this reality of this post-depression, economic despair that is captured. We also had, Raymond mentioned that it really captured this perspective of the Jewish experience much differently than some of the other stories, and it is one of the rare voices that we hear in this course that is Jewish, and that speaks to that different historical and cultural and religious tradition. We also had from Angela. Angela mentioned that there was this striking theme of optimism throughout the story, and I think that is one of the key elements to that story, is that sense of optimism. It's definitely tattered, and it's definitely not a shining beacon, but there is a sense of hope, a sense of faith. Now, for the most part, all of you absolutely, without a doubt, loved John Cheever's The Swimmer. Now, Cheever is an excellent foil for a lot of the Southern literati. He has a sense of how post-war American literature has brought this kind of different temperament to the point. He is associated with breakdowns and primordial desires. He is the sense of breaking down without kind of having an outward breakdown, the sense of anomie, the sense of the world sucks, but I live in a huge mansion, but it still sucks. The sense of the artificiality of life, this facade that one lives behind, this performance. And it really struck home with a lot of you. In fact, Monica mentioned that Cheever was a great read, and it captured this midlife crisis, which is one of his dominant threads. Jeffrey mentioned that this reality that appeared in the storm during the narrative with Nettie was just powerful. Alethea mentioned the dreams and loss were very much interspersed or intertwined in this story. Michelle mentioned that this idea of neighbors representing moments in his life or periods in his life, this kind of narrative plotting that occurred. We also had the sense of loss, tragic life lessons from Rachel. Lauren really saw this story as breaking in tradition, and maybe this is the new way that American literature has to exist, is, as Lauren mentioned, this break from tradition, this break from narrative. Joe P. also kind of went along with that by saying that there's so much metaphor in this story that it really does enrich it. And then, of course, Chastity just mentioned that she loved it, which I think is good. When you can find a piece of literature that really opens up something, not so much a thought, not so much a being, but just opens up and you are engaged in it, then that truly is a good moment. And I really enjoyed seeing how many of you really focused on that, like Carmen mentioning the symbolism that captured the struggle that occurred in The Swimmer. And that Joshua, kind of pulling that this was the best story because of its metaphoric quality. And that Hattie, that this was an excellent reading of time. And time, the capturing of time, the conflation and explosion of time is also something that's a question that occurs in postmodernity. And that really came along with the idea of Slaughterhouse-Five, which a few of you mentioned, but Deborah W. really mentioned that reading kind of struck her. And I think Vonnegut is one of our true great postmodern artists in his narrative. Now, I think that overall the readings were fantastic, and I enjoyed seeing how you interspersed and engaged the pieces. Now, as I mentioned, you are going to be reading your last set for this week, and you're also doing your final. The readings for this week are very focused. One second, I've got a call. Hello? Yes, can I call you right back? I'm actually doing our recording right now. Okay, I'll call you right back. Thank you. Bye. Sorry, that was Joe. So basically, as I mentioned, the readings for this week are very much focused on engaging that last point of view, which is very much a postmodern and very much a contemporary point of view. This contemporary point of view is going to be very much tied up in the post-colonial, which is of colonies that have been oppressed by others. It's going to be focused on, of course, Slaughterhouse-Five, Entropy, and Schrodinger's Cat, which are kind of sci-fi, time condensers, and of course a little bit of questioning of who we are with Cathedral. So please take a look at those, read them, post your posting, post your peer response, get your final in. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions, and I look forward to this last week of readings. Have a great day.